On this episode, I'm interviewing Jessica McPhee. Jessica is a TikTok creator. She is what I call the prevention queen. I absolutely love what she's doing on TikTok. Her tag is Trauma Mama, and it stands well. And let me introduce Jessica. Hey Jessica, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I was telling them I found you on TikTok. You are like the prevention queen, I say. You call yourself Trauma Mama, which is perfect. To me, you're kind of like a little angel because you show like that calm side of the aftermath. And you've done some serious healing, so I'm so excited to hear your journey. It shows that you've done some serious healing. And I just wanted you to start from the beginning.
What happened was that one day in my community, there was a man who was a city councilor in my community. His name was Donnie Snook. And it was released in the news that he had been sexually abusing many, many boys for a very long time. And I was sitting alone in my living room watching the TV, saying to myself, they're just going to talk about this. And then tomorrow there's going to be another news story and it's going to be forgotten. Somebody needs to do something about this. So in that moment, I kind of had this like voice inside that said, why are you waiting for someone when you are someone? So why can't you just go and be that person? So I decided that that's what I was going to do. And I had never talked to anyone really about my story aside from my husband and my mom and a few friends from high school. And I decided to organize an awareness walk. And with that walk came an interview with a newspaper. And I didn't plan on disclosing then, but they asked me, why am I so passionate about raising awareness about sexual abuse? And it just kind of came out. And my voice was this crackly old whisper. And I was absolutely terrified. And bless the journalist who was interviewing me because she was so patient with me. And I went from being silent my entire life to being in our local newspaper, my story.
Oh my
and
goodness.
it was huge.
That exact event happened to me. Like it literally went from silent to local newspaper. Like so similar anyhow, very similar.
Yeah. And it's a scary feeling because you almost don't know what to do with that sense of freedom of, okay, this isn't my secret anymore. What do I do? So a lot of discomfort came to me when I had to talk to family and say, hey, this happened to me. And they had to do a lot of reflecting, on my childhood, any signs that they missed. They had a lot of guilt that they worked through. And that is really where my healing journey began, was just getting the secret out. And it was amazing how much lighter I felt, how terrifyingly freeing it was to finally say something after so many years of saying nothing at all.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the secret and what is the secret and what happened? And you don't want to get into detail, which is totally understandable. But if you want to just touch on how things happened. And
Sure. When I was around 2 or 3, that's when my sexual abuse began. So my mom had this best friend, and I'll call her S. S was married to R, and R was my abuser. My mom got pregnant with me when she was 16, had me when she was 17, and my dad did not want me in his life, and he did not want to be in mine. So my offender, or my abuser, I kind of use the two terms interchangeably, saw that as an opportunity to be kind of a father figure in my life. I was a shy people pleaser, did not like upsetting adults around me. So I was basically like a prime target, single mom, shy people pleaser. And the abuse started off very innocently, like touching here and there or groping, and then eventually became, anything and everything you could imagine. And at the age of 5, it was discovered that I had contracted a sexually transmitted infection. And I remember how scared I was as a little kid because I'm being abused. And then I have to go to all of these doctors who are male, of course, to be, given treatments and be looked over and checked on, and then having to go to operations. And then again at the age of 6. And as an adult, I look back at that moment and think, okay, I know I didn't say anything out loud about what was happening to me, but someone should have said, this isn't right. And
Yeah.
maybe they did, but to the knowledge of my mom and to my recollection, they came to the conclusion that because I didn't say anything was happening to me, that they basically were dumbfounded as to how I contracted this. And they didn't realize that, number one, my abuser was the one educating me about what was happening to me, and he made it seem quite normal and fine. And the threats that he had said to me made me feel terrified to say anything. I wasn't going to risk being sent away from my mom or my family, and I was willing to put up with what was happening to me in order to stay with the ones who I felt the most safe around.
Oh, I love that you just put that into terms, because I've never really been able to explain that to somebody. Like people will ask me like, how did you not know you were being abused? Or because like you really, it's just so normal, and that person is so sure of themselves when they're abusing you, that you are so
Mhm.
young and vulnerable that you feel that sureness. You're like, shit, like he's right. Like we should, this is normal. Like it's nothing. And the way you explained that was really interesting. And the way that you were saying that you didn't want the secret to come out because you didn't want to lose everything that you had. And that in my story is very similar. My grandfather ran a great business in town. I knew for sure that my mom wasn't going to be there for me. So I knew that if I told, um, I was going to lose possibly everything. And I did, I mean, at 21, I did. Yeah. And how
Yeah.
old were you when you disclosed?
I tried to disclose at the age of 12, but it was like I think R did something to me when I was younger, and my mom just kind of said, oh, okay, well, he cares about you, so I'm sure it's nothing. Then she saw me go through my high school years and battle with, depression, anxiety, isolating myself, a lot of underage drinking, just unsafe choices. And when I told her when I was 17, it was after watching the show Intervention. A woman was struggling with addiction and explained how she felt when she bumped into her abuser in public. And the way she described it, I I could probably still cry, even though this was so long ago. It was exactly how I felt when I bumped into my offender in public. And I said, okay, all these years of nightmares and flashbacks that I've been brushing aside, saying, oh no, I'm just making it up or it didn't happen. I finally said, no, I confidently knew in that moment that how I was feeling was valid, and I wasn't just making it up, because why would I want to make something like that up? It's not exactly joyous to think about horrible things happening to you. So I just shut my computer and I said, listen, R did this to me and I know it. And she kind of just said, okay, it makes sense now. And she encouraged me to speak to a counselor. And I spent years talking to different people, different approaches, and finally found a therapist who was able to help me process the pain, to really get down to the root cause of it all. And it really helped open my mind to who I was, because I felt like I lived my life in this shell. Like I knew I had a body, but it was like I was always floating outside of it, too afraid to be connected to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah. That's just such an interesting piece for sure. Like I totally get what you're saying by floating outside of your body. And I was saying earlier, I I'm still struggling with that like intimacy and that body and my own being in my own body. And I find TikTok really bringing that healing piece to it, because I'm seeing myself and I like to dance and I love to do that stuff. And it's really healing for me. So I really understand what you're saying when you say, you are disconnected from your body.
Yeah.
And something else I heard you say was fact that you kind of shopped around for therapists and like you know you didn't have the experience the first time that was great or the second time that was great. You had to find somebody that worked for you. And I think that's a really important thing for people to hear because I also was the exact same. It took me, you know, when I came forward with the abuse, I was 21 years old. I said to my husband, I got drunk one night because I was drinking a lot. And I said I was sexually abused. And the next morning, he never said a word to me, but the next morning he woke up and he's like, is what you said to me true? And I said, yes. And then he said, who was it? And I said, it was my stepfather. And he said, well, our son isn't allowed to go there anymore. And my exact words were, why? Why? Because I thought like it was so normal. And like I'll never forget that, you know, saying why. And he looked at me like I had 5 heads. And his mom works for mental health, like she's a mental health worker. And she came over and she's like, listen, I know this place, like we're gonna get you into some therapy. And that was life-changing for me because I was able to see that what my stepfather was doing was wrong, but I never really healed. I only healed from that piece of knowing that it was wrong. But then I started using drugs to cope with everything that else that came with the abuse, you know, and that's the, you know, abandonment of my family and all that scary stuff that comes up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, you know, you're the queen of prevention. So I wanted you to tell us the grooming process a little bit, if you can.
Oh, yes. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because it can be it's so powerful and people can fool a community of thousands of people. And the first stage is kind of targeting a victim. So they look for I might be from the Maritimes. They look for children who are in vulnerable situations, so single parent homes, high poverty, abusive homes, children whose parents aren't really involved in their lives very much. And they do that for a reason, less likely to be suspected. And once they target the victim, they try to get to know them and build trust with the child and with the child's caregivers so that they can see the offender as a caring, kind, charismatic, giving person. Because most people will say, I can't believe they were a sexual offender
Yeah, my
because they were so
stepdad.
kind. So helpful.
Yeah, yeah. My
Yeah.
stepdad was the town. Oh my god, he was so funny. You know, everybody loved him. He coached hockey. Like he was the dad of the community. You know, so that's a
Mhm.
great point. Yeah,
And people, there's a stereotype that, they're men who live in creepy vans that look like they haven't showered in 10 years, but it is not. It's your everyday person. And it's not just men. It's everyone that, I mean, it can be everyone. It's not everyone. It can be anyone. And that's, the scary part, which is why I focus so much on prevention, because they are so good at manipulating and tricking people we just want to care and believe that other people are good people, and they use that desire to trust against us, um, as a society. And once they find out more about the child and their life and start building that trust, they fulfill a need. So if a child lives in poverty, maybe they would provide money, clothing, food, or opportunities to do things they couldn't normally do. And once they feel like the trust has been established, they start initiating those one-on-one situations where abuse might not occur right away. But again, still working on building that trust. And the kid might go home after a few outings and say, yeah, we had so much fun. And then they'll start to initiate the abuse. It might start off small, like touching, comments, things like that, because they want to make sure that the child is not going to have a reaction like, you can't do that. Because if they do, then that child is a risk. So they want to take their time so they can manipulate them. So once the abuse starts, they need to maintain control. So they will figure out what the child loves the most and use it against them. So in my instance, it was your mom will send you away and you'll never see your family. So the child feels so much responsibility to keep that secret because we feel confused and ashamed, even if we don't understand what's happening to us. Our body tells us we don't like it. Uh, in an emotional way. I know physically there's a totally different reaction that can happen.
That's what's confusing.
And then in our mind, yeah, it is absolutely confusing. And we don't necessarily, they're not going to tell us, hey, I'm sexually abusing you. They say, hey, this is normal, this is okay. And that's how could a child disclose if those are the messages they're getting, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And the grooming, another piece of the grooming that I wanted to mention was like, for instance, my mother, my mother was sexually assaulted as a child, and she never really got her justice. The perpetrator, he faked a heart attack and got away with it because all the victims got scared, right? So my mom, she was a very vulnerable. She was also 17 or 16 when she had me. And she was also very vulnerable. She's already been sexually abused. My stepfather comes into the picture, and he groomed her for me, and he's, and like, that's a piece that I kind of wanted to ask you about as well is, the grooming the families and how they go about grooming the family.
Oh, that's a very high priority for them because when I've spoken to many survivors over the years, they all say they were the kind person, the helpful person. My mom needed to go to work last minute. They offered to help. They create this image of being this savior so that their behaviors that are dangerous are hidden. They're not going to go around overtly acting like a sexual offender. They're going to go around acting like a nice person so they can sexually offend. And grooming the family is the way that they gain that one-on-one access to a child. Because if a family member doesn't trust them, then they're not going to have that one-on-one time that they require to sexually abuse them. So a big piece of the grooming process, and for their intentions to be fulfilled, is by brainwashing essentially everyone in the family. And there have been instances, especially with the Donnie Snook case I mentioned from St. John, that he had so many people fooled, an entire community. It wasn't even just a family, it was an entire community. And he had people, volunteering and working with him who maybe might not have seen something, but definitely should have known there were many red flags. And seeing what he did for, so long, I realized, okay, more needs to be done. If a man can get away with this for decades and people don't talk about it, then we are missing something. And the
Absolutely.
biggest thing that's missing is that education piece.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's interesting, my situation too with my mother. Okay, so my mother was 16 or 17, and she, like I said, was sexually abused. So her emotional mindset was not there at all, and she couldn't really parent me. From what I hear, she was really struggling to parent me. So when my stepfather came into the picture, he was a fucking hero. Like, he walked me up and down the halls, fed me bottles when I was crying in the middle of the night. I the first time I remember being sexually assaulted was 3 years old, but there's pieces in my life where, my sister had rashes, and someone pointed it out to my mother at 6 months old. So I wonder, if it was sooner for me. I don't know that. I'll never remember, before the abuse. I don't think there was before. So it's just, and it's interesting because he, somebody had already really groomed my mother for him. He just came in and did everything he knew what to do, and it's a mindset. Like, it's literally a mindset in a sense,
Yeah, it really is. And for some reason, they're just very good at choosing people who they know they can manipulate easily.
Absolutely. And isolating the victim, I'm a perfect example of isolating the victim, right? Like, I'm 34 years old. Every single one of my family members supports my abuser. Every single one of them, because he gained all of their control and trust, and he controls everybody through sex. He's tried to have sex with my grandmother. He's tried to have sex with my aunt. He's tried to have sex with everybody I've ever come in contact with who tells me about him will say that he's tried to have sex with them. And when he does that, he gains their control. And there's a whole family that supports him. And I have my suspicions, And yeah. It's unbelievable how much you can get control with sex. To me, yeah. It's just how much control you can gain from something like that, Yeah. What affects, I see you as such a healed woman, and you were talking about a little bit of drinking in your teens, but how has this affected you in your adulthood?
Oh my, very deeply. Since becoming a mom, I found that the biggest changes have shifted for me because I knew that becoming a mom would bring up a lot for me. And I thought I was, mentally and emotionally prepared for that. Thankfully, therapy gave me some skills, but, I had to go to therapy when my daughter didn't wear diapers anymore because it meant she was transitioning to that young child that I was when my abuse started. So it really affects my parenting, and I try not to let it affect it in a negative way. I'm very self aware. My doctor says I'm too self aware sometimes. So I recognize in a moment when my emotions or my trauma is coming up, and I give myself some space, even if that's only 30 seconds before one of my two children is looking for me, to breathe through it and tell myself I'm safe now and it wasn't my fault. And I'm about to embark on a new part of my healing journey that I've been avoiding, which is connecting with my inner child, because I know that my inner child missed out on so much because I had the burden of my life, my safety, my family on my shoulders. And I think having my children has opened me up to that, because when I'm outside playing bubbles with my daughter or chalking on the driveway, I'm in that moment. And I know that I'm doing all I can to educate them and keep them safe without allowing my trauma to cloud my judgment on how I should parent them. I'm trying not to be a helicopter parent. I'm trying not to take my trauma out on them. And it's exhausting.
Oh, I hear
I I have good days and bad days, but I just have shifted my mindset since being on maternity leave with my son this past year that I need to prioritize myself, that I
that.
give because I always have. And I have nothing for myself. And I've lost myself in motherhood and being a teacher and a wife. And it's not fair to me. So now I voice my needs and I have boundaries, and I'm gaining this new sense of confidence that I never had before. And there are still times where I have dark weeks where it takes me a while to get out of it, or I have a flashback and I really need to work through it. But my safety plan really helps in those situations. And I tried to shift my mind from fearing all of these feelings and memories that were coming up to welcoming them so that I can learn more about myself and what I went through, because there are still so many unknowns. I know
Yes.
bits and pieces, but much of my childhood is still locked away. And when those moments come up, I say, oh, okay, I understand. And I just tell myself that I am loved and safe and I love myself. And I take it as, another piece of the puzzle I can kind of put together.
Yeah, when you said your flashbacks, and I have a lot of repressed memories, so I know what you're saying. But when that flashback happens for me, I used to panic in those moments, in flashbacks where I just wouldn't even want to allow myself to feel them. And now, because I've let myself feel them, when I have a new one, I say, it's okay, feel this one out. And then the next time this memory comes, you're going to realize how easy it is. It's just a memory. Like, and I don't know, it's like you said, it's shifting that mindset to something that works for you. And it might be different for everybody, but for me, it's I loved how you said that. You feel that flashback. Sometimes you just got to feel them. You have to. And I know we all don't want to, but we have to remember, because remembering is healing, and like learning your triggers and all those great things that come with it. Um, if you could say something to a child that was in your position right now, what would you say to them?
What is happening to you is not your fault. You are not to blame, and there's nothing you could have done. You are loved, and this does not define who you are. You are not dirty or unlovable. You are beautiful and strong. And okay, I'm starting to cry. I feel like I'm talking to my younger self or something.
That's why I was like literally feeling the same way. And I was like, I think she's talking to me. You're healing both of us right now.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what all child victims need to hear, that we're loved and we're not damaged because we feel so damaged, and we are worthy of love. And one day we will feel that for ourselves and we will find safety. And I think, just stay strong and talk to someone. And if they don't believe you, keep talking because someone eventually will.
I love that you said that because I'm going to share a story if that's okay with you. I talk to many victims of sexual assault online, and I'm talking to a 13-year-old. I was talking to a 13-year-old girl. Thank God she's safe right now. But when you said that, I'm going to tell you this story. She came to me and she had been being sexually assaulted by her stepfather. She went to her cousin's house or not her cousin's, sorry, her friend's house and told her friend's mother. Her friend's mother called her mother who knew the abuse was going on. So guess what? She stayed home for 2 weeks, brutally assaulted for another 2 full weeks before she found the courage to tell again, because that person didn't do what she was supposed to do. And I love that you said that, because that was 2 more weeks of that poor girl's brutal attacks. And this guy was mean. So, yeah, it's just so important that you said that. Keep telling, because she told and she's safe right now. And I'm going to tell you, she got into foster care. She's in a great home. And she went to summer camp this summer and she was so happy, and she's met a boy and she's all excited, and she's 13 and she's so sweet. And like, there is a better side. So keep telling.
I always tell kids that, because grown-ups can get so caught up in their own feelings or trauma, or, if grown-ups seem too busy, is what I say, or they kind of don't listen, find an adult who will, because someone eventually will.
Yeah, someone will. Yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, Jessica, for joining tonight.
Yes, thank you. I've been admiring you for so long, and to be able to talk with you is an honor. And you keep rocking those dance moves, girl, because I am dancing right along with you on the other side of the screen.
I love it. We're a good team. You're the prevention and I'm the healing. Let's do this.
Yeah. Look at the world. We're coming.
Yeah. Thanks, Jessica. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.